Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter, or we say, some very important topical matters. Now, this morning, we are going to be looking briefly at the Global Fragility Act, that's the GFA, and Haiti's, what is it called, the Transitional um, Presidential Council, right? That's a TPC, the Transitional Presidential Council. There are so many, acronyms and expressions going around that sometimes you wonder if you can remember everything. So this article is entitled Roping Haiti into the Global Fragility Act is Washington's End Goal. Let me share this article with you. We can't look at everything. I think it's a three-part series. I can't show you all the parts to this article because it's quite detailed. You can go online and you can do your own research. Okay, so we have here roping Haiti into the Global Fragility Act is Washington's end goal, right? Now, that is the goal of Washington. And here we can see the Transitional Presidential Council, right? And these are the members of such council. And of course, we can see that this is part 3 of the article that is here. Now, what the thrust of this article is to inform us that Washington's end goal is to militarize Haiti and the Caribbean region. The fact of the matter is that Washington has always wanted to control the region. When Washington launched its war on terror in 2001, thereabout, it was more concerned about the Middle East, and it had its troops and its entire force in that area, among other parts of North Africa. And the Caribbean was left void, right? There was a vacuum in the Caribbean in terms of global hegemon, or global hegemons, shall we say. Now, we know that China came and filled that void, and to some extent, Russia. And the United States is concerned that whilst they were concerned about the war on terror in the Middle East and these islands and Latin America in this hemisphere, all of us were controlled by these two powers, China and Russia. And now the United States finds that, wow, they have had too much influence over over this region, and it's time for them to get out. So the United States is creating the environment in which these people need to get out. And in so doing, they have to militarize the region. And in militarizing the region, at times they would have to foment conflict, even racial conflict, economic conflicts, military conflicts, all sorts of conflicts Washington can devise and can effectuate, which will affect the region negatively. So you create the problem and then you come in and pretend as if you're there to solve the problem. But you are the one who fomented the problem. You are the one who fomented the conflict. And then they will, of course, you know that wherever Washington goes, wherever the military goes, it exports chaos, right? It exports chaos. And those of you who really want to understand how militarism functions, you have to read Chalmers Johnson's book, particularly on Okinawa in Japan. And you will see how the US military runs that provincial part of Japan, right? You have to study that. You have to look at what are some of the things. And the Special Forces Act, right? There's a SOFA, and you have to read these things. I can't divulge everything to you. And this platform, by the way, is not allowing me to say half, not even a quarter of what I want to say, because we know that our speech is being restricted as we speak. So I have to be careful what I divulge on this platform. So it's very important that you do your own search. So after calling an emergency meeting in Kingston, Jamaica on March 11th to concoct a way to fill the void left by former Prime Minister Ariel Henry's unexpected ouster, Washington finally swore in its 9-member temporary presidential council on April 25, although the ceremony had to be done secretly at the National Palace. due to the body's unpopularity, right? So it's not popular. It's not a democratic president or presidency or council, I should say, if you will. It is an undemocratic, it is an authoritarian council. And this is what Washington is doing. And, you know, in the article, he went on to say that this is going to be the testing ground. Haiti is the testing laboratory of what will happen in the entire world. So don't think that this is about Haiti, or don't think what is happening in the Gaza area has only to do with the Israelis and the Palestinians. These are laboratories where they are experimenting politically with what they are going to impose on every nation in the world, on every man and woman, right? And it's time for you to understand that. A lot of you, sometimes when I speak to you, I realize that you're not understanding not even a quarter of what is happening. But I can't force you to read what you don't want to read. I can't force you to understand what you don't want to understand. And I must say that you're not going to understand it if you don't delve into your Bible. You've got to have a deep dive into your Bible and ask the Lord for wisdom and understanding. This is going to come through a lot of studying, deep study. This is not only just because just a mere reading, surface reading, as what some of you like to do. Many of you are still surface readers, and as I speak to you, you know, it doesn't make sense arguing, because at the end of the day, if you think you know, then you have to remain ignorant. The disciples thought they knew when Christ was on earth. The rabbis, who were the doctors and the scholars of the day, the scientists of Christ's days, they thought they knew. And Christ told them that they were ignorant of the scriptures because they just had their ideologies and they thought that their ideologies were true. And because they had learned them from the high seat of academia, then they thought that what Christ, who had not gone to school, he had not received any formal education, but he was what? He was God in human flesh, and they did not recognize him, right? Now, the TPC would be installed at the Villa de Actual. Caretaker authorities had said earlier last week, forgive my pronunciation, that a delegation of Leslie Voltaire, Himmler Rebu, and Raymond Jonty deemed the area around the palace to be too dangerous, right? So it was too dangerous for them to have that meeting. So this is an unpopular council. The people are definitely not for this council. And this council, what he's saying is that they are going to, Washington's major reason for having this TPC, for having for creating transitional presidential council, is to bring the multinational forces, the multinational security forces from Kenya and Jamaica and from Barbados and from, I think, Belize, among other Caribbean countries. It's a joint effort so that they can have elections, perhaps in 2 years, as they have suggested. And then after they have elected a so-called legitimate government, then Washington will be able to work with that government to have troops from the US go to Haiti to occupy them permanently. I think this is a permanent, according to his article, the thrust of his thesis is that Washington desires a permanent occupation of Haiti, because Haiti is a strategic point, right, in geopolitics. Not only does it have, prime assets and, you know, enviable natural resources, but it also is going to be that key point to launch its attack on any other potential rival, that's military rival in this region, right? Now, he also mentioned that Haiti is the only country except the Vatican, because the Vatican is a country by itself, even though it's within a country, it's a state, I should say, by itself, right? So even though it's situated in Rome, and Rome is in Italy, right? But the Vatican, because of the power that it wields over the world, it says that it is a state, right? This is the beast of Revelation, that we have to also delve into. The beast of Revelation is the Roman Catholic papacy. But so much to say, Haiti and that institution, Rome, the Vatican, are the only countries, I think, who still recognize, and a few others, I think, who still recognize um, Taiwan as a separate nation state, and they have diplomatic ties, right? They continue to have diplomatic ties with Taiwan. The Dominican Republic was one, but they severed that relationship some years ago, right? So they are just recognizing China as that dominant force in that area of the hemisphere. Now, after Washington sends its, after these people are elected, let us look at the Global Fragility Act, because that was what the major thesis is. Using the soft power and hard power forces outlined in these series' first two articles, Washington seeks to ensure the election of a new Haitian president who will quickly sign on the dotted line of a deal called the Global Fragility Act, which would essentially place Haiti back into colonial status, with U.S. troops stationed in a nation made dependent on USAID humanitarian assistance shipments. So that is really what is going to happen. And he gave us some historical analysis and background. In 1915, U.S. Marines invaded Haiti for the first time, installing a puppet president, Sudre Darty Gonave. I always don't know how to pronounce his name, who invited them to stay on. Washington is going to great lengths to avoid repeating the terrible optics of its early 20th century's gunboat diplomacy. The time it is making sure, or this time I should, it's making sure to use the MSS proxy force to install a U.S. puppet, which will then invite in U.S. troops under the GFA. And the GFA is the Global Fragility. So those of you who have children in North America, particularly males, but now because we're talking about equity, even if you have females, be ready, because at any time in the next 3 years or so, some of your sons and daughters will be recruited to fight wars on behalf of the Imperium. You have to understand that this is what wars, why they're very dangerous. And I think the founding fathers have stated that it is the most despicable enemy of all the enemies that of the Republic, of the United States Republic. Then it's no longer a republic. It was or is and remains the greatest enemy, the most despicable enemy of all enemies, wars, because that's what it does. Eventually, it's going to destroy your entire country, right? And leave you with nothing, including lives, right? Many lives will be lost. So many of you who are parents, you have to be watching what is happening in the world, because very soon your very children will be impacted by everything that is happening on the world stage, right? It is not about Haiti alone. Yes, it's about Haiti because the Haitians are suffering, and we have to recognize that, and we need to help where we can help. But remember now that this is a bigger agenda, and we have to study the small agenda and analyze the much bigger agenda, which is about to unfold right before our eyes, right? Now, hear this. During a recent panel discussion at the Council on Foreign Relations, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, Brian Nichols, explained that Washington has a long-term strategy for Haiti under the Global Fragility Act that has a 10-year plan to support Haiti's increased stability and autonomy. The autonomy Nichols hopes to foster is from China, to whose Belt and Road Initiative the GFA is a countermeasure. So this is the reason why they're there, right? And they're sending the troops. But one of the things I must say that this article has clarified, I've always asked myself the question, how is it that they are going to have the Caribbean troops along with their Kenyan counterparts invade Haiti? That's not many troops on the ground, right? Just a few, well, I shouldn't say a few, but not many, right? Because I think 1,000 coming from Kenya. How many how many troops are coming from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, from Barbados, from Belize, from all these, but the Bahamas, I don't know. But that will not be able to solve the problem, right? It has to be a temporary solution to that, temporary occupation, because there's no way that you could have so few troops going there, right? I hope you understand what I'm saying. So now I'm sensing that this is just a temporary solution. And after the government is established, a legitimate government is established, Washington is then going to send troops from the US to Haiti, right? As a form of permanent occupation. Right? So this is a guy that has been elected as the president, right? Edgar LeBlanc, right? I think he's the appointed Haiti's president by right. So they have appointed him as the president, as it were, okay, of the council. So that is what is happening. So this is what is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to really begin to assess what is going on. Really, what is the purpose? What is the real agenda? Right? Do not just listen to what people are saying and what your leaders are saying. You have to also look at what they're not saying, what they're implying, and the symbolisms that they also use in their speeches. You just cannot just tell me that, oh, well, he said that, she said that, right? So where is your brain to assess and to look beyond words and to see what they're doing? Is not so much what they are saying, but what they are doing. Right? What they are doing is what should be of major concern to you, right? And we talk about the fact, just a little digression about Jamaica's wanting to become a republic. Do you think that Washington in Jamaica really wanted to become a real republic? That Washington was going to allow that? If Washington is actually militarizing the entire region, not only Washington, we learned, but even Canada is doing so, is involved in this process. So here you have two major powers in the Caribbean militarizing the region, and you in your little narrow mind think that a real freedom is going to happen and you're going to have a real republic. The United States is not even a real republic at this point, right? It's a fall republic at this juncture of its history. It's a militarized country, right? And that is what you have to understand. And some of you are boasting and you're bragging about the United States military is the greatest in the world. And it is the greatest in the world, but it's not greatest for you, because it's going to wreak havoc on you and on every sphere of your life. But because you are so uneducated, you do not want to humble yourselves to get good books and to ask God for wisdom to understand what this grander agenda is going to be. A partnership under the GFA between Haiti and Washington would ensure that Haiti remains under US hegemony for decades, right? For decades. And Jamaica is just right there too. And the DR and, and the other Caribbean countries. Remember too that Haiti is very, very close to Cuba. So we don't know also what that agenda could entail. Could the United States launch, you know, uh, some form of military occupation from Haiti or from Jamaica? We don't know what's going on, right? We do not know what is really going on. At least we can't know everything, but we have to ask questions, make connection, and don't just lock ourselves into one mode of thinking or think that that is going to be impossible, right? We should now be thinking that a lot of what we thought were impossible 4 years ago are now possible, right? Some of the things, some of the draconian laws, some of the authoritarian diktats and the authoritarian, rules and regulations, what those that we thought would have been unthinkable and we thought would have been despicable in Western societies have now become normalized. That is what we have to understand. We're not living in the free world as we think we're living. And I think for the most part, we love it. Many of us still love it. And for the life of me, may I just suggest to you also that it's now time for us to stop watching TV, playing sports. You have to leave the sports now because this is not going to help to develop your brain. Sports is not going to help develop your brain and your children's brain. Have them exercise, but you have to teach them. We don't have enough time left on this earth, and we have to gather enough information as we can, because very soon, a lot of the books that we think we have access to right now will not be accessible to us. Or leaders are going to make them inaccessible, including the very Bible, right? And go back to the Dark Ages. We are heading in that direction at this juncture of our history. As I was listening to a podcast by, what's his name again? Gerald Horne, right? Professor Gerald Horne at the University of Texas, right? He was the one who wrote the book, it's not the Black Jacobins, but he wrote a book, confronting, right? Confronting. The title of his book is Confronting the Black Jacobins, right? That was written by Gerald Horne, and Gerald Horne is an intellectual who has written many books, right? Now he says, and he rightly said it, and I think that he is spot on when he said that we think, a lot of us in Western societies, including the United States, and he was referring to the United States at the time in the context in which he was speaking, that freedom is etched in stone. And freedom is not etched in stone. It's something that has to be fought for and something that has to be maintained. But we're living in a world right now in which our education system has not only indoctrinated us, but it has normalized a certain way of thinking that has destroyed the ability of people to reason. Most people, that is. Most people to reason. Right now, if you're getting a PhD, and that was happening for so many years now, you have to condition your mind. If you're a thinker, you have to condition your mind to write a lot of nonsense. You have to condition your mind to write a lot of nonsense, because that's what the professor wants to write. This is what the entire research infrastructure, because they're funded by these large corporate donors and entities, right? And they have to have their knowledge and research in that narrow vein, and talk about the non-essentials, right? The DEI and the diversity and the equity and the inclusion. That's what it's all about, right? It's all about knowledge and learning to become a critical thinker, right? That's not what the university is trying to do. That's not what the university is trying to foster, which is what it should be doing. And what you're seeing happening on campus is going to also have very negative effect on what happens in the acquisition of intellectual knowledge, right? You cannot have a situation where you're going to have a law and say that a certain group of people, only a certain group of people cannot be spoken about. It doesn't make any sense. Now, this would also block diplomacy and investment from countries like China. So that's what the United States is trying to do. This is what I was saying here. In 2017, China offered to overhaul Port-au-Prince's crumbling infrastructure with a $4.7 billion aid package. In return, Haiti would drop its recognition of Taiwan as the Republic of China. Haiti remains one of the only 11 nations, it's not only 11 nations, not counting the Vatican, which recognized Taiwan as an independent nation. The planet's other 182 nations recognize only the People's Republic of China, right? So the United States wants to definitely break up that sort of connection. Listen to what he's saying here, because this is also very important. Washington also wants to prevent Haiti from developing closer diplomatic relations and economic ties with Russia. President Jovenel Moïse established formal diplomatic relations with Moscow only 1 month before his assassination 2.5 years ago, accrediting Russian ambassador Sergei Malik Bagasarov. It was the first time, I should say, it was the first time Haiti had established diplomatic relations with Russia. Many argue that this could have been a factor which might have led Washington to greenlight Moise's assassination. Right? This is just an allegation. It's not suggesting here that that is what happened, but that is an allegation. Right? It is rumored that that could have been the case. Right? So this is important that we understand that this is a military agenda. Right? This is a military agenda. It's a long article. I can't take you into everything, but I'll, of course, um, I will put it in the description after the video is finished, right? So that is what you need to be aware of. Now, I just wanted you to listen to a clip from this video, and I also will attach it to the description, and you can listen to it. I think you need to listen to it. And this is a conversation between Matt Taibbi and I can't remember the name of the other gentleman that is here. This is Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi is on to the right. He's here. This is Matt Taibbi, one of America's finest journalists, right? One who, tries to be objective in his writings, right? And I have been following for so many years right now. I can't remember how many years I've been following Matt. But Matt is a very he tries to be objective as much. We're not objective beings, right? But as much as you can talk about objectivity, he tries to give objective analyses of what is happening in the US and around the world. But he's talking to one of his colleagues. I was trying to look for the name of the person but yeah, Walter. Yes, so we have the Walter and Matt, right? So it says Matt Walter Kern, right? So he's speaking to Walter Kern, and he is here to your left. But listen to what they're saying as they begin to talk about what is happening in Palestine and Gaza, and particularly as it affects the college campuses, the protest actions that we're seeing, that we're witnessing on the taking place on the college campuses in the United States. All right, let me take this out so you can hear it well.
Maybe we don't have expertise about Israel and Palestine, but when we start moving into speech in America, right, and what is and isn't part of our tradition, what is and isn't acceptable, what's good and what's bad, that's an area where I feel much more comfortable talking about. I understand the laws, I understand the history.
Sure.
I probably come at this.
Yeah, me too. And that's one of the reasons that I think we agreed to do this, because it's starting to impinge on freedoms and rights in America in a way that I think is not just worthy of comment, but obliges us to comment to be consistent with past conversations and positions we take.
Right. And just to copy something in the same way that you did, I probably came at this from a slightly different direction than you did. I mean, I grew up, I'm a little bit younger, and I was probably much more leaning in the direction of sympathizing with Palestine. I had Palestinian friends when I studied overseas, in St. Petersburg as a young person. So, I heard a lot of stories back then, and my general inclination about this issue has always been to toward condemning the blockade. Also, Israel has really been a pioneer in the development of it's sort of the model of modern digital censorship. Glenn Greenwald did one of the earliest stories about this in 2015, where he talked about Facebook making a deal with the Israeli government and the Mossad, where basically 95% of the requests that the Mossad made to Facebook for moderation were honored. And from what I understand, Facebook was really one of the only ways that people can communicate in Gaza. They don't have very many press organs that really work. There's significant digital censorship of outlets like the Electronic Intifada, right? And so this is a big deal, and that basic arrangement that they had, which was, if you want to make money having Facebook in Israel, this is the price that you're going to pay. You're going to allow us to control content that means a lot to us. And I think since then, a lot of you've seen that model replicated in to various degrees in other countries, and it's starting to come a little bit to the United States. So that's another area where I've always looked at this issue and thought, Palestinians have been, the canary in the coal mine when it comes to modern censorship tools. They're like the testing ground for how all these things work. So that's true. But leaving all that aside, yeah, you're right. It's now come back to our shores. And this week and last week, this story has exploded domestically in a way that it really hadn't before, with both sort of takeovers of encampments on college campuses that have garnered a tremendous amount of attention. And then, should we start with the House bill? Because that's the reaction to all of this has been really amazing. I mean, there have been things that have gone on both sides, but the official reactions.
I think we should start with the House bill because it affects everyone, depending on whether you live anywhere near an Ivy League campus. You may or may not care, or UCLA, you may or may not care about what's going on the campuses. But this is a bill to manage the speech of all Americans. And it's, for me, a bill that sets a terrible precedent. Besides being bad in itself, it takes out an entire topic, the discussion of Israel and, Jews in general, I guess, and attempts to set parameters for our discussion of it. They're very vague parameters in some cases, and they, to me, are stupendously unconstitutional. I mean, to make a kind of constitution for how you can talk about Israel and then enforce it is unprecedented.
Yeah. So, and we can talk about this too in a minute, but the House bill, which, what did it pass? It passed 320 to 91, by the way, which is unbelievable. But let's just hear how they're selling it first. This is a CBS report on the bill.
On Capitol Hill, the House Rules Committee advanced a bipartisan bill that aims to define anti-Semitism. The House voted on the legislation is expected this week, and it could not only reignite division among Democrats, but also impact student protests against the war in Gaza on campuses around the U.S. Nicole Killian is on the Hill for us and joins us now to discuss. So Nicole, let's talk about the impact that this legislation could have on the protests.
Well, I don't know that there will be an immediate impact simply because this is a bill that is now making its way through the House. There is a companion bill in the Senate. We don't know how quickly they will move this legislation per se, but as you mentioned, this does modify the working definition of anti-Semitism, holds it to a more stricter standard when it comes to enforcing anti-discrimination laws, potentially, which could have an impact on the type of language, for instance, that is used in some of these protests. But again, I would not expect any kind of immediate impact, although this bill is likely to clear the House. But that being said, there are a number of efforts underway in both chambers. We know later today, for instance, Speaker Johnson is set to announce a House-wide crackdown, to use the Speaker's terms, when it comes to combating anti-Semitism on college campuses. And
okay, so we get the idea with that, right? But more specifically, there are like 9 things about this that are terrifying. They're essentially going to bar certain kinds of speech.
Okay, sorry about
on university campuses. It's going to have the department and put it on the Department of Education to enforce anti-discrimination laws. And the definition of what anti-Semitism will be could be things as vague as denying Jewish, claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is racist, using certain symbols and images, drawing comparisons of Israeli policy to that of Nazis. That's the same thing that happened to C.J. Hopkins, the playwright in.
Okay, so let's stop there because we can't look at everything. But I hope that you've made the connection. I hope that you're seeing where we're going, where these two journalists are going with their assessment of what is happening. And the recent bill that seemed to have passed through the House this week, the anti-Semitic bill. We are living in dangerous times, right? This is not cliche anymore. We are, in fact, living in some dangerous and some frightening times, right? And you've got to get your acts together. Don't think that you're middle class and that you're special, because these people don't see you as special. In fact, they want to show you that you're middle class, understanding. And if you think that you are free, they want you to understand that you are not. You are just a slave in the grander scheme of things, right? So it's time for human beings to unite against the small elites of globalists, elite class, who desire to enslave us once more. And let me just read something to you before I enter this video, because sometimes you think that slavery was finished, that it will never come again. Well, one of the things about it, slavery has never ended. We still have slavery happening in lots of the world, in different parts of the world. So we ought not to think, but I think in the Western Hemisphere, we tend to think, or we tend to believe that we're free and our freedoms are etched in stone. And we can go to university and we can go get a job and life will be wonderful and we can have our nice homes and our picket fences. And we don't want that to be disturbed, because we think that that is enjoyable. But the fact of the matter is that it is not so. It's an illusion. It's a delusion. And if you have, I'm not saying that if you have a house, you should not enjoy it. You should enjoy the fruits of your labor. But do not put your faith and your confidence in a home or in an education or in having children and think that that is going to last forever, because it certainly will not last forever. Because as we often say in the Christian realm, this world is not my home. I'm just a pilgrim. I'm just passing by, right? I'm just passing through this earth. And whether or not we live in a time in which we are going to have wars and we might be killed and stuff like that, we die, right? The longer you live or the more you live, you realize that life is short, right? Life is short and there's really nothing here, right? Just here, some tall buildings and some nice cars, and you think that that is what that gives you a tip. What's that, right? To have some tall buildings and you're surrounded by lots of wars and people are being maimed and killed and murdered every day. And you think that life should be like that, right? So what is this world to be so much excited about? Nothing in this world should excite you. There's really nothing. There's really nothing to it. You know, there's really nothing to this world. Fame, look at these people like the Diddy's, you know, he was, apprehended, or I don't know what they're doing with him now, Sean Diddy. But the fact of the matter is that these people, they hoist you up, right? They exalt you and then they put you down, right? That's how it works. So those of you who think that you're pushing and you want to identify yourselves with the power structure, you want to connect with them, woe unto you, because remember now that there is going to be a day when they are going to turn against you. All right, now let us look at what's going on here with this mouse. I'm not able to move it. Sometimes it gives you a lot of problems. Okay, let me see if I can use my hand here. And yeah, I'm not going to wait on it because, so I'm going to share my screen and read you this particular Bible passage, right? And it's coming from Revelation 18. And we talked about the fact that Revelation 18 spoke about the fall of spiritual Babylon, right? In the previous video, I spoke shortly about it, right? This is much more involved and much more to unpack because the Bible is deep. And you don't think the Bible is deep, you've got to be crazy, right? If you don't think the Bible is deep and is a book full with wisdom and knowledge and understanding, you are crazy. Okay, now, so we have, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why we have so many crazy people running around behaving as normal people. Now, in Revelation 18, verse 11 and onwards, I will read probably 3 of the or 4 of the verses. We have, let's begin at verse 11. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. So there's going to come a time when we are going to weep over Babylon and this grandiose economic structure that Babylon has built up. The merchandise of gold. Listen to this now. This verse is very important. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all the manner vessels of ivory and all the manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil that there's so much crazy about, and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots. And chariots there in the Bible refers to arms, weapons that these nations used to fight, because back in the days, that's what they used, right? They didn't have guns and all of these bombs that we have now, right? And the nuclear weapons. They had chariots. So when the Bible uses chariots here, it's using that biblical language of what is going to be in our days, which we have now, weapons and nuclear weapons, and we have all these bombs and drones and all the different types of weapons that we have, that these military powers have in their arsenal, right? And slaves, right? And slaves. So this is talking about the latter day just before Christ gets here. So there will be slavery and what? And the souls of men, right? So even your soul will be bought. Even your soul will be bought if you allow that to happen. And many of us are selling our souls, right? We give up our principles because we want all of these precious metals and pearls and linen and the fine linen and the odors and the ointments and the frankincense. All of these are symbols of wealth, right? Of wealth that men are yearning for and men desire. But guess what? There is going to come a fall of Babylon, and you and I are going to lose all of these things. The gold and the silver and the precious stones and all of the money that you think you have acquired over the years that you have worked hard for, it is going to fall, because when the judgment of God visits Babylon, the entire system, right? The entire system is going to come crumbling down. So the United States is running after everything and wants to achieve full spectrum dominance and control all of the resources of the world. She will lose them eventually at the fall of Babylon. But look at what verse 15 says. The merchants, which are the businessmen of the world, the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. Weeping and wailing. And that is something that we need to understand. All right. So that is what I think I'm going to end here. I'm not going to even talk about the Global Fertility Act at this juncture of the discussion. Wow, what's going on here? That I've had with you, right? I think that we have spoken enough, and you should have gotten something, right? Some intellectual food to chew on, right? I've given you some intellectual food on which to chew, on which you can chew. So please chew and chew well, right? And make sure that you digest it, right? Because that is where the understanding is going to come. And to distill the things that perhaps are nonsensical, right? Because when we have nourishing food, some part of it might be not needed, right? But you are going to store up, your brain will store up the nutrients that will help you to grow and to understand the world in which you live. Right? Thank you so much for joining. I hope that I will see you in another chat, in another video, when I shall seek also to unfold some of the important matters happening in our world. So long. All the best to you. Happy Sabbath and Godspeed.